Hello and welcome back to the Exist Better YouTube channel. Today we are talking about yet another highly controversial and triggering topic. Just as an intro, I just want to say, for anyone who's not familiar with my channel, the theme on this channel is the individual human shadow and the collective unconscious. So that which we are swimming in the culture that we don't know we're swimming in. So I have allowed myself to do this thing on this channel where I am poking at certain wounds. And so I'm not ruffling feathers for the sake of ruffling feathers. The point here is to show you the shape of the human shadow, right? The shape of what we are unconscious of, that we're holding within us, that is usually a wound or a pain point. And how collectively as a society, we join up with the people who are on one side and we fight the people who are on the other side, and it's all just shadow projections. So there's a science to it. It's not random. So we're going to do it again here, just like always. There is a split. We're going to talk about this split today. The split in our consciousness in the Western world. There's a billion. We've talked about a lot of them, but there's always more on this channel. The split between people, often women, but it can be men too, people who are raging against the patriarchy, and then the people who say the patriarchy doesn't exist and everything is just handed to women and things are better for women, right, than they are for men. How can both of these be true at the same time? Well, they're not. Neither of them are completely true. So we have to start at the beginning, otherwise nobody's going to understand, right? Some of you definitely know this already, but let's start at the very, very beginning before we even explain the patriarchy and all that stuff. The setup for even being able to understand the patriarchy. Let's talk about that. Throughout history, spiritual traditions, all throughout the history of our evolution through nature, there has been two forces, masculine and feminine. Right there, we have an ideology currently in the Western world where that is too offensive to say, because we're getting into the weeds, so we miss what we're talking about, right? It becomes offensive because we're misunderstanding it, and everything's offensive when you're misunderstanding it, right? So masculine and feminine, the two forces of nature that create reality, yin and yang. When we go out into the wild, when we look at flowers, some of them have masculine and feminine parts. I think I learned in like 5th grade biology anyway. We see animals mating and there's masculine and feminine, and we see these two forces creating reality, not even just in terms of the two sexes. It goes beyond that, right? So when we're talking about masculine and feminine, we are not talking about boys versus girls, right? It's bigger than that. And we're not excluding people who don't identify with boy and girl. That's the big trigger point to start, one of the many, because people think that when you say masculine and feminine that they're not included, because they don't like the terms, they're upset by the terms, they don't identify with the terms. No, you are a part of nature. I am a part of nature. I have masculine and feminine in me. You have masculine and feminine in you. It doesn't matter if you're a dog, a cat, a baby, a wolf, a man, a woman, somebody who identifies as a dog, a cat, or a man, it doesn't matter. You have these forces of nature in you because you are a part of nature. All spiritual traditions that I can think of have acknowledged this. This is the main underpinning of Chinese medicine with yin and yang and balancing the two. This has always been a thing throughout our evolution. So nothing has changed. We're all still a part of that. So when we get into discussions about patriarchy and we're picking a side. I'm picking the men's side, the conservative side usually, or I'm picking the women's side or the liberal side. Again, we're missing the point. And the reason we miss the point is 99.999% of the time because we're too triggered and wounded around the topic, and we haven't done our work. We haven't done our work to untangle some of that trigger and see, like, you know, I need to do some work around my relationship with my mom, or relationship with my dad, or relationship with how I'm thinking of ex-boyfriends, girlfriends, you know, other people of the same sex. It could be anything. There's work that each individual is to do if they're even going to be able to see clearly. So that's the gateway for even getting into the deeper discussion, right? So there's that. Once you kind of comb through a lot of that stuff and see it for what it is, just like individual traumas, then we can get into the discussion about what patriarchy is. And so we'll do that now. So to start the conversation, right off the bat, everyone's going to freak out. Patriarchy is a real phenomenon. It always has been in our culture in the West, and before that especially. Patriarchy has always been a phenomenon that was happening in human societies. The reason so many men can't handle this is because they think it's an invalidation of their pain. They think if they accept that patriarchy is real and that it exists, then they're not allowed to have anyone care about their pain. But, again, going big picture here, acknowledging that the patriarchy exists and has always existed, at least, you know, throughout all recent history, is simultaneously an acknowledgement of men's pain and women's pain, obviously. So when there is an imbalance to either masculine or feminine, there is pain for everybody involved. But the patriarchy as a phenomenon is not strictly about men harming women. If we see it that way, we see a piece of what's going on. We don't see the big picture, which is that patriarchy is intertwined with survival. It is intertwined with the survival instinct. So the more active, right, when we look at yin and yang, survival is associated with yang. So when we are in survival mode, you can guarantee that we will be very prone to patriarchal conditioning, patriarchal behaviors and structures. So setting up society from the impulse of survival. That is what patriarchy is. It's when you set up a society or an institution or whatever you're setting up, you set it up from the impulse of survival. So I have the whole story of that at the link below. You can check out my new Substack. It's called Undomesticated, where we're going to be talking more about these issues of, you know, shadow and the feminine and what got stuff down and how we rebalance and all this stuff, and how it pertains to us in the Western world and also probably other places as well. Check that out. Subscribe. If you want to support the work that I'm doing, you can get a paid subscription. It's only like $6. This is what we're seeing in the West, and we see it much worse in other countries, right? We look at North Korea, look at the Middle East. We have this intense suppression and abuse of the feminine. In the West, it's a lot more subtle. And it's a lot more user-friendly, right? Like we have like all this like, I'm a powerful woman stuff, right? That I've talked about before, where it's like, rah, 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 let's go women's empowerment, but it's all just about being masculine. It's like, what? Right? So we see this massive imbalance with the feminine, to the point of it being definite abuse of men and women in places like North Korea and the Middle East, and it's incredibly, incredibly destructive. So this is where people come from, this angle of like, how dare you criticize America? This is the greatest country, blah, 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 right? And it's like, well, yeah, but comparing to these other places, well, sure, yeah, we're not in that situation, so definitely. But that doesn't mean we're not allowed to improve, and we're not allowed to acknowledge and recognize the things that are going on in more industrialized societies that are much more almost like insidious, much more like nefarious, not because they're outwardly evil, but because they're so hidden. And people insist that it's so normal, and people insist that there is no other way, and everything is already balanced. And all these problems we're seeing crop up, which again I talk about in the articles a bit, like all of these like Western problems we're seeing, and we're like, who knows? I guess this is just the way it is, right? And it's like, no, it's this imbalance that is being funneled through all these different avenues, like the medical system, the education system, blah, 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 blah. And we're seeing the same imbalance everywhere, but because we're so zoomed in, we can't see. And because we have no spiritual foundation in the West, right? We can't see what's happening because we've never learned any spiritual teachings, right? All we've learned in the West is more of like indoctrinated religion, which those, again, are steeped in this imbalance of the masculine and feminine, right? There is a man in the sky, and he is good, and we are bad, right? And he controls us, and women have to have babies, and they can't do anything else, you know? Like, again, with our religions, that largely we've gotten rid of them, right? A lot of people aren't religious. Everything's very secular, and we assume that we're progressing. But no, we're just carrying our dogma with us, and we're placing it in scientific materialism, hyper-rationalism, right? This left brain sort of phenomenon that I talked about in the last video, that a lot of people were saying there's no scientific basis for. There is a scientific basis. Some of this comes from neuroscience. And when I talk about the brain, I always make sure that there's a neuroscientist saying something that kind of tracks with what I'm saying, right? I don't just make outlandish comments about the brain without anything to back it up. So we're seeing this phenomenon play out, and we can pull really far back and see different things happening, or we can zoom really close in, as I do sometimes with the brain stuff, to see, you know, what is going on all levels. So that's my little spiel for today on the patriarchy. Again, this wasn't really in depth. If you want the in-depth, you can just click the link below and the whole blog post is there. Give you more things to chew on. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.